The Book of Two Ways isn't a burial text. It's a consciousness navigation manual encoded in wood and pigment, 4,000 years before neuroscience had language for what it describes. And somewhere inside you, you already feel the absence of this knowledge. That low hum of unreadiness, that quiet dread of not knowing what comes next. 3 minutes after your heart stops, a timed sequence begins. And this book was placed in the coffin because you were supposed to carry the map with you. There is a pattern running underneath every major spiritual tradition on earth. Once you see it, you cannot unsee it. And it has been hiding in plain sight inside the oldest illustrated underworld guide ever discovered. Egyptian priests did not simply believe in an afterlife. They engineered a protocol for navigating it. The Amdat, the text of what is in the underworld, maps 12 discrete phases of transition, each one anchored to a specific moment in the death process. Not metaphor, mechanism. A timed sequence, beginning at the precise moment the heart ceases to beat. This knowledge didn't stay in Egypt. It moved. It traveled through the Orphic mystery schools of Greece, through the Tibetan Bardo Thodol, through Sufi cosmology, through the Kabbalah's account of the soul's ascent through the Sephiroth. The same architecture, the same phases, the same gated passage from one state of consciousness to the next. Different languages, one map. And here is what makes this moment different from every other moment in history. Modern near-death experience research, the work being done right now by cardiologists, neuroscientists, and consciousness researchers, is confirming what these priests encoded 40 centuries ago. The timing, the sequence, the specific phenomenology of what the dying report in those first critical minutes. Stay with me through this entire journey, because near the end of what we're covering today, we arrive at the 3-minute revelation, the specific window the Amdat identifies, and what current science now says is happening inside it. That is the piece that reframes everything. And I need you to be present for it when we get there. The first layer is the object itself. In 1900, archaeologists excavating the cliff tombs of Deir el-Bersha in Middle Egypt uncovered something that didn't fit the established story of ancient religious literature. Inside a coffin dating to somewhere between 1900 and 1800 BCE, they found the interior panels covered in an elaborate illustrated map. 2 routes, drawn in careful detail, one crossing water, one crossing land, gates marked along both paths, guardians stationed at each gate, and inscribed beside the routes, precise verbal instructions, what to say, what to know, what to carry at each threshold. This was not decoration. This was not mythology in the way we use that word to mean something untrue. This was a navigation system. Egyptologists called it the Book of Two Ways, and for most of the 20th century it was catalogued, translated in fragments, and largely set aside as ritual literature. Interesting, obscure, peripheral. Then, in 2019, Dutch Egyptologist Harco Willems published a comprehensive analysis that reframed the entire text. What Willems documented was that the Book of Two Ways is the oldest illustrated guide to the underworld ever found, predating the more famous Book of the Dead by several centuries, and that its structure is far more systematic than anyone had previously acknowledged. This wasn't a collection of prayers. It was a sequenced protocol, a set of instructions with internal logic, designed to be used, not merely recited. So what are the two ways? Here is where the decode move matters. The land route and the water route are not geographical descriptions of two physical paths through some underground terrain. They are two states of consciousness available to the dying. The land route, solid, bounded, sequential, maps the passage of a mind that is still anchored to linear identity. Step follows step, gate follows gate. The traveler knows who they are and proceeds accordingly. The water route is something else entirely. Fluid, non-sequential, moving through what the text calls the field of offerings, a state where the ordinary structures of self dissolve and the traveler moves by a different kind of knowing, not logic. Resonance. The question the text is actually asking is this: which state will you be in when the transition begins? And its answer is direct. Preparation determines the route. The lucid traveler has options. The unprepared traveler has none. This is not abstract theology. The gates and their guardians encode something specific. Each gate in the Book of Two Ways is associated with a challenge, a question the traveler must answer, a name they must know, a formula they must speak correctly. Get it wrong and the gate does not open. Egyptologists have long read these as magical passwords, superstition dressed in hieroglyphs. But look at what each gate actually tests. Knowledge of self. Aid, clarity of intention, the ability to remain coherent under pressure. These are not magical competencies. These are neurological ones. The capacity to maintain conscious awareness through radical physiological disruption, the capacity to recognize what is happening without collapsing into panic or dissociation. What the priests were encoding was a training curriculum for a specific kind of cognitive performance, one required not in life, but in the first moments after life ends. Consider what this means for the civilization that produced it. Egypt was not a culture preoccupied with death in the way Western popular imagination assumes. Egypt was a culture obsessed with continuity. The pyramids are not tombs in the modern sense. They are continuity machines. The mummification process is not about preserving a body. It is about preserving a coherent information structure long enough for the transition to complete. The Book of Two Ways placed inside the coffin is not comfort for the grieving. It is a manual placed in the hands of the traveler. You are going somewhere. Here is how to navigate it. And the priests knew something that 40 centuries of institutional religion has worked very hard to obscure. The navigation is only possible if you have practiced it while alive. The gates cannot be unlocked in the moment of death by someone encountering them for the first time. The map only works for the lucid. And lucidity, real lucidity, the kind that survives the dissolution of ordinary consciousness, is cultivated, deliberately, over years, through specific practices that the mystery schools preserved and transmitted in exactly the way that the Book of Two Ways was preserved. Encoded, protected, passed to those who were ready. This is the layer most translations don't reach. The Book of Two Ways looks like a map of where you go, but it is actually a manual for who you need to become before you get there. But here's what they never finish telling you. The map has a timing mechanism built into it, a specific window, a sequence of phases that begins at a moment the text identifies with surgical precision. And when you understand what that window is, and when you learn what the Amdat says happens inside it, everything you thought you knew about the 3 minutes after death changes completely. There is a layer to this that modern medicine accidentally confirmed, and the ancient priests deliberately encoded. It sits right at the edge of what science will say out loud, and what the mystery traditions have been saying for thousands of years. And once you see it clearly, the Amdat stops being a curiosity. It becomes a manual. Here is what the research actually shows. In the final moments after the heart stops, the human brain does not go quiet. It surges. Measurable gamma wave activity, the same frequency associated with heightened awareness, deep meditation, and peak cognitive states, spikes dramatically. Not a flicker, a surge. Researchers at the University of Michigan documented this in cardiac arrest patients, and what they found shook the neuroscience community. The dying brain, in its last measurable window, becomes more coherent, not less, more organized, more awake. Now ask yourself the obvious question. If consciousness is just a byproduct of brain chemistry, why does it intensify at the exact moment the chemistry shuts down? The answer the data keeps pointing toward is the one the institutions are least comfortable with. Consciousness doesn't end with the body. It exits. The CIA's own declassified gateway process documents. And yes, those are real. You can pull them yourself. Describe consciousness as an energy pattern that can and does operate independently of the physical system. The language in those documents is careful, bureaucratic, almost reluctant. But the conclusion is there in black and white. The self is not the body. The self uses the body. The Tibetan Book of the Dead names this window with extraordinary precision. It calls the moment immediately after death the dawning of the clear light, a luminous, expansive awareness that the untrained soul mistakes for obliteration and recoils from. The Vedic tradition calls it the moment of moksha possibility. Mystic Christian theology, particularly the Hesychast lineage of the Eastern Orthodox Church, describes the same threshold as the encounter with uncreated light. 3 traditions, 3 continents, 3 completely separate civilizational lineages, all describing the same 3-minute window in almost identical terms. And then there are the hospitals. Thousands of documented near-death accounts, catalogued by researchers like Raymond Moody and Pim van Lommel, describe a sequence so consistent it stopped being dismissible decades ago. The tunnel, the acceleration, the life review, not as a metaphor but as a literal, high-definition replay of every significant moment, felt from every perspective simultaneously. And then, the light, warm, intelligent, non-judgmental, a presence that knows you completely. The decode move here is this. That sequence is not random. It is not the brain hallucinating under stress. It is a phase transition, and a structured passage through layers of reality that the Amdat maps with the precision of a pilot's checklist. The tunnel is a frequency shift, the life review is a calibration, the light is a destination marker. Every element has a function. Every element was known. The ancient priests did not stumble onto this. They were trained in it. The initiates of the Egyptian mystery schools spent years, in some accounts, decades, preparing for exactly this passage. Not because death was frightening, because the window was real, it was brief, and arriving at it unprepared meant missing everything it offered. The 3 minutes after death are not a void. They are the most information-dense, navigable, consequential 3 minutes of your entire existence. And the people who built the pyramids knew that. But what they encoded in the Amdat goes deeper than a map of what happens, far deeper. Because the Amdat doesn't just describe the journey, it tells you exactly what to do during each phase of it. And the first phase begins at a moment so specific, so precisely identified in the text, that when you hear it named, you will understand why this book was never meant for ordinary eyes. This is the layer that separates the Amdat from every other death text ever written. Not what it describes, what it instructs. Most people who encounter the Amdat for the first time read it as mythology. The sun god Ra descending through 12 phases of the underworld, battling serpents, navigating darkness, rising again at dawn. Beautiful, symbolic, ancient, and completely misread. The Amdat is not mythology, it is a flight manual, and the flight it describes begins at a moment the text identifies with surgical precision, the instant the heart stops beating. Each of the 12 phases corresponds to a measurable shift in consciousness that the dying soul moves through in sequence. The royal tombs of the Valley of the Kings, Thutmose III, Amenhotep II, Seti I, were inscribed floor to ceiling with this text, not for decoration, not for the gods, for the king. Because the king was expected to use it, to navigate by it, in real time, in the dark. So what does the first phase actually encode? Here is the question that cracks the whole thing open. Why does the Amdat begin with what looks like sensory chaos? Fragmented images, rushing sound, a disorientation of light and form? Because that is exactly what happens. The first phase is the sensory flashback, the life review, and the Amdat identifies it not as chaos to be survived, but as a frequency reset to be understood. The soul is not being overwhelmed. The soul is being recalibrated. Every image that surfaces in that phase is a charge being neutralized. Every memory that replays is a weight being measured and released. It is not random. It is the system running its diagnostic. The sun god's descent through darkness encodes this directly. Ra does not fight the serpent Apophis out of fear. Ra navigates through Apophis because the serpent represents the accumulated density of unresolved experience, what the Tibetan tradition calls karma, what modern trauma science would call unintegrated memory. The passage through it is not a battle. It is a processing event. Manly P. Hall spent decades analyzing this text, and his conclusion was unambiguous. The Amdat is a consciousness technology, encoded in mythological language, precisely because mythological language survives institutional suppression in a way that technical language does not. You can burn a manual. You cannot burn a story that has already become sacred. Now here is the decode move that changes everything about how you read this. The judgment scene, the famous weighing of the heart against the feather of Ma'at, is not a moral tribunal. It is a coherence measurement. The feather is not a standard of virtue. It is a frequency baseline. A heart heavy with unprocessed fear, unresolved grief, unexamined identity. That heart cannot match the frequency of the feather. Not because it is evil, because it is dense, burdened, still attached to the weight of the physical. The entire Amdat is structured to help the soul shed that weight, phase by phase, before the judgment scan runs. It is preparation technology, 12 phases of guided release, encoded in the walls of the most sacred spaces the ancient world ever built. And the people who inscribed it there were not priests recording mythology for posterity. They were initiates who had already made the journey, in consciousness, through years of mystery school training, and returned with the map. The Egyptian initiation rites were not symbolic rehearsals of death. They were actual rehearsals. Controlled passages through the same frequency states the Amdat describes, practiced until the navigator knew every phase by feel. Once you see what the judgment scan actually measures, the entire moral framework of organized religion reframes itself completely. It was never about sin. It was never about punishment. It was always about frequency, about whether the soul, at the moment of crossing, is light enough to move. And that raises the question this entire video has been building toward. If the Amdat is a navigation manual, and the window is real, and the journey is structured, then who is doing the navigating? You are. That is the payoff. That is what the priests knew, and what the institutions preferred you never find out. You are not a passenger in this crossing. You are the navigator. The map was always yours. The 3-minute window is not something that happens to you. It is something you move through. And it is hackable, preparable, and yours to meet with open eyes. When you hold this map in your hands, fear of death does not deepen, it dissolves. You stop being a victim of the unknown and become someone who has already studied the terrain. Drop your interpretation of this in the comments. Seriously. What landed for you? What shifted? Your insights genuinely add layers to my understanding, and this community deepens the work every time you contribute to it. This channel continues the initiation. Sacred geometry, pineal science, the psychology of symbol, it is all coming. Subscribe so you do not miss the next piece of the map. You were never meant to cross that threshold unprepared. The book was buried with you for a reason. You are not separate from the journey. You are the journey. See you at dawn. If the 3-minute window revealed something to you, leave it below. Your insight may be the piece someone else needs. The next layer of the map is already waiting. Subscribe, and we continue.